Bonjour à toutes et à tous et bienvenue sur CANNESERIES Live, la plateforme digitale de CANNESERIES saison 3, disponible du 9 au 14 octobre en ligne, mais aussi à Cannes. Et maintenant, je vais switcher en anglais pour accueillir un invité que je suis très, mais très heureux de recevoir, Mr. Jared Harris. Mr. Harris, I am very, very pleased to welcome you. It's an honor for me and for CANNESERIES to have the possibility to chat with you. To me, my first memory of you would be Happiness by Tatoué, where you play Vlad. What memory do you have of Happiness?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of your series. It's very prestigious, and I've been to Cannes twice, so I know how important it is in the terms of in the world of cinema. So I'm very grateful to be invited. Happiness, Happiness was supposed to go to Cannes, but the distributor got freaked out and backed out of it and basically dumped it back into October Films lap. My memory of that. Initially, I was asked to come in and audition for the role that Philip Seymour Hoffman played, and I would never have got it because Philip would have gotten it. But I didn't know that he was up for that part. But I felt that it was a little bit, just in sort of slightly similar territory in a way to what I'd done with Christine before. I shot Andy Warhol, and I wanted to find something that was a contrast to that. So when I met Todd, I said I would like to audition for the role of Vlad. I think it was called Boris at that time, and he was surprised, but he said okay. And I liked the idea of what I found appealing about that character was he didn't have any hang-ups. I mean, a lot to do with that story was a lot of people's sort of anxieties and neuroses. And I read something quite interesting about that people who emigrate to America generally don't have significant mental health issues. They normally start to occur in the second and third generation. And this guy had just got there. So he really didn't have any kind of questions about himself and whether he was right or wrong in doing what he's doing. He sort of saw himself as being the kind of the hero of the piece. And I got to sing a song as well. So and we shot my part back to front. I mean, the first thing we shot was the end, and we worked our way backwards, which was a weird experience. And then I think all of my stuff was with Jane Addams, and she was just fantastic. So, and it was fun. Todd, he had worked with kids before, so initially he was quite pedantic in his direction, and he'd explain things to you like what your mark was. When your cue, when you were supposed to speak, and then Jane and I would be standing next to each other. He goes, Jane, this is your mark. It's the yellow mark. This is your Jared. You're the blue. So you come to your blue and you come to your yellow, and then you say your line, and then you say your line, and then you say your line. So, but I think he realized that he could trust us fairly quickly.
Interesting. I also wanted to begin this interview with this little video. It's the first clip I wanted to show you.
Hey, how do you know she's even going to be here?
I overheard her. She was talking to this blonde girl. Very attractive. Single too.
Uh-oh, the riffraff's out tonight.
How's it going, Andy?
I'm all right. Listen, guys, private parties, mate. Some posh do, you know what I mean?
So it's a clip from the movie The Rat Show, Peppers.
Yeah.
I believe it's your very first appearance on screen, right?
I think so. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
What do you remember from it? Your first movie, your first appearance?
Yeah. Well, my brother directed it.
Damien, yeah.
I'd been helping him audition Rachel's and Dexter's I mean, not Dexter, Dexter Fletcher, the main character, Charles, I think is where, wasn't it? So I've been, you know, working with it for quite a long time. And I think it was the producer, it was Andy Karsh, who said we should cast Jared as the friend. And my brother didn't want to do it at all. He was worried about being accused of nepotism. But after a long time, Andy didn't persuade him right away. Andy said, well, now it's working in the opposite direction, you know. So I came in and I auditioned for it, which of course I should have. And what I remember about that specifically was that I had a really good shorthand dialogue with my brother because we understood each other so well. So it was a slightly misconstruing first introduction to the dialogue between director and actor. Because it's not always that easy, you know, you don't always quite understand what one another means. But I also remember, and I got on really well with Dexter. I mean, those sorts of parts are fairly easy because what you're supposed to do is help out the main character and be best buddies to the main character, you know, and help them solve problems essentially, you know. What else?
How does it
I remember about it?
How does it feel when you, as a young actor, how does it feel when you see yourself for the first time on a screen?
I mean, it's never, even now, it's always disappointing.
No.
It's always disappointing. You look up, you go, I can't believe I look like that. And you know, your voice, you hear yourself speak and you don't like the sound of your voice because it sounds different to the way it sounds to me now. Yeah, I mean, it's always slightly traumatic, to tell you the truth. It takes me a long time to watch something that I've been in because I remember everything that happened when we shot, you know, what were scenes in the film, and it takes me about 10 years to forget what was going on that day, the rewrites of that scene, whatever issues there were, just the certain where you made it, you know, like that was the Café de Paris. I remember that. And I remember very clearly walking down the stairs on a rehearsal. Of course, you know, the room's completely silent because all the music and everything is put in afterwards. And I heard very loudly a woman on the dance floor look up and go, "Oh my God, look at his hair." That's what I remember clearly about that.
Okay.
Look at that haircut. Look at that haircut. Yeah.
Let's go back a little bit in time. You always loved acting with your brothers, but it was never an option to become an actor until you went to Duke University.
Sure.
What happened then and there?
What happened at Duke? Well, I mean, I was curious, but I was very, very shy. And, you know, my younger brother he's an extrovert, he's very gregarious, and everyone thought that if he didn't want to be he wanted to be a lead singer in a band, which he was for a while, but if he could always go to acting. My elder brother always wanted to be a director. My elder brother tried every trick in the book to get out of boarding school. And I saw that my mother was determined that he was going to have to do his exams no matter what happened. So I put my head down and went, well, I'm going to get them in the first go because I want to get out of here. It was a Benedictine school run by monks, you know. So they thought that I enjoyed academia and that I was studious, but really I was just trying to escape it. But I ended up going to Duke, and I remember wanting to get away because I didn't really like the future that was being mapped out for me by my family. And I remember you go to college and they take the freshmen there a week early so that they can orientate them to the campus. It's called orientation week. And then every evening they buy big kegs of beer and get you drunk. So you'd really have start to not a good idea of where you are. And then I remember on the Sunday before classes were going to start again on Monday, and I realized, well, half my plan has worked, but I'm back in school. Well, how did that happen? And I saw a flyer on the table that said free keg of beer at Branson Theatre. So I went along to the theatre, and I ended up auditioning for a play. And the director was called Dick Ormiller. The play was A Murder is Announced. And I think I also got my first review from that play, which was hilarious because the review was something along the lines of another success for Dick Ormiller. It's an Agatha Christie play. It's a rollicking, it moves along swiftly. The actors are good, and by and large, all the accents are well handled, except for Jared Harris's accent, which seems highly improbable. I liked the camaraderie, and I liked the intenseness of the experience, and you make these very quick bonds with people because you've got to help each other when you get out there in front of the audience. I like the fraternity, and and then you also need to study because you've got to figure out what world you're in, what the style of the thing, the genre of the thing, the meaning. Obviously, Agatha Christie is not as challenging as doing The Three Sisters, but it was the first time I enjoyed cracking books, other than doing classical civilization, which I adored, Greek history, Greek mythology. And it just felt comfortable. And you also, actors are whores for laughs. And I remember getting my first laughs, and it was such a buzz. So exciting. Absolutely. So, I can remember very clearly a lot of the thoughts and feelings that were going through my head in those first times that I was on stage doing those scenes. Just being so aware of the audience as well, and of their interest in the way that that was waning or it was picking up, and they were responding to certain lines and laughing, and it was a real buzz.
After going back in time, let's flash forward a little bit in your career and talk about a little known TV series called Mad Men. Little known. And I would like to show you a clip. So it's not the scene where we found Len Price's body. It would be too easy. It's another scene.
Yeah, good. Not that one. Might be a giveaway.
It's tragic, it's comic, and ironic. It's crystal clear in the emotions. It's a true testament to acting, writing, and directing. And I thought this scene was brilliant because it sets the real suicide scene for Lane taking his life in the office as a meaning and a purpose, right?
Yeah, when Matt told me what his plans were, brought me into his office and he gave me a giant slug of very expensive brandy, and I knew something was wrong. And then as soon as he's offering you a drink in the middle of the day, I was like, oh God, here comes bad news. And he said he apologized, but yeah, he was going to kill the character off. But when he told me how he was going to do it, and he got to that scene where the Jaguar wouldn't start, I literally fell off my chair laughing. Because I understood how clever it was. That's why Matt he's such an intelligent writer. He's very, very smart, because he set you up to expect that Lane's going to kill himself at that point. But then he pays it off with a really funny joke. So you think that's the end of it. So actually, at the end of the episode, when he kills himself, it's a shock. But he's been telling you from the beginning he was going to do it. He's so clever. You know, and with Mad Men and those scripts, a lot of the physical action is described in the script very, very specifically in great detail. So, you know, the idea of snapping the glasses, that was in the script. The one, you know, trying to fix now the engine with the half a glass, that was in the script. I mean, I just watching it, I found it very sad. It moved me. Lane, what a poor, tragic character he was. He really, interestingly, when we did the scene where I was getting fired by Don, I had all these really frustrating questions, because I could see how he could get out of it. And I knew that if Don was in that situation, Don would see those doorways too, and he'd kick them open and go out. And Roger would as well. And the most obvious one being that he knew about how what had happened with Joan and how they got the account, and that was blackmail material right there, you know. But he wasn't. He wasn't dirty enough in a way. He wasn't enough of a street fighter to fight that corner. But it was frustrating to me, because I could see, like, no, respond this way to that. This is how you get out of this situation, you know. But you know, obviously, that wasn't in Lane's makeup.
It was frustrating also as a spectator to see Lane. Don't say that. You have the open door there.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
Mad Men was a true example of precision in scripts and in
absolutely. And in all departments. I mean, it was one of those things where, you know, everybody was consistently on their best game. I mean, you know, one of the secret weapons of that show was Janie Bryan, the costume designer. I mean, she had a tremendous impact, not just on the show, but eventually on the culture. And she kind of re-educated American men how to dress. You know, I mean, it's tremendously important. And then, of course, obviously the DP and Chris Manley and what's his name, Bishop, the production designer. And I mean, all across the board, they just had so many people who were just doing their best work. And that doesn't happen very often, you know.
Yeah.
Not because people don't care. It's just alchemy, you know.
Absolutely. Matthew Weiner controlled everything. And never allowed any improvisation, I guess.
No, I think I improvised one line of the entire 3 times I was there. Yeah, it wasn't particularly significant either. But you know, Matt did come to me and he would ask me questions, because you know he wasn't as familiar with the English culture. Initially, Lane was going to be Jewish, and because he wanted a reason why there was a glass ceiling for Lane. He knew what was going to happen to him midway through the season, and they were going to try and send him to India. And but he didn't believe that I was believably, recognizably Jewish. Although I said, look, there's lots of gingers in Israel. You know, there's a lot of Jewish people with red hair. You know, he said, no, it's something else. I don't really buy it. But then we started talking about the class system in England and how limiting and defining that was. And then I mentioned how, you know, one of the things that give you away is they ask you where you went to school. And if you want to tell people where you went to school, they know immediately what your background is, what your parents' background is, and what the prospects for your future is. And then I didn't realize that, but he absorbs everything. And he put that line into the second episode. Episode 2, he says, one of the Lane goes, well, you know, he finds America refreshing because no one's asked him where he's gone to school. So there are a few things that influenced it, and particularly in that last episode as well. I told him that as somebody who has left their home country and moved to America, the idea of going back home, having as a failure, is just, I would rather disappear into the desert than go back home with my tail between my legs. You know, you just can't go back. Once you've set your, you set your path out for yourself and you've struck out, you cannot go back unless you've accomplished what you wanted to accomplish. And Lane obviously hadn't. So it was deep shame in him being sent back that way.
Talking about this, I know it's a strange transition, but we often talk about the fact that Sean Bean always dies on screen, right?
Yeah.
But you are pretty good on that too.
I'm pretty close.
Yeah. Do you know how many times you died on screen?
No, I don't know how many. I know what my favorite is.
I know. I guess. That's the next clip. I hope.
Stop! Don't move!
Beautiful, isn't it?
You'll understand it. This reunion is brief.
If you take one more step, I'll shoot!
Goodbye, Agent Dunham.
Don't!
Teleporter. It may be killing me, but in the meantime, it's made me something rather special. You see, your bullets just go right through me. And soon Dr. Bell will see just how special I am.
Get him!
What could be the most fantastic death than being torn by space and time?
Exactly. Split in half by the space-time continuum. That's got to be a first.
And maybe the last. Silly question, more serious, but I always wondered, for an actor, dying on screen is not something trivial. Whatever the context is, you play the last moments of life. So you have to contemplate and think about this critical moment we're all going to go through. Unfortunately, is it a particular, special thing you play, dying?
Well, there's a couple of different ways to answer that. I mean, first of all, a good death scene is very valuable because it means that the story wants to make that impact on the people who are watching it. So, a good death scene is a very valuable thing to have. It's also a pain in the ass because it means you've got to look for a new job. But in terms of the playing of it, I think you have to decide what it is that at every moment, what it is that you're feeling. And I think that it probably comes as a surprise and a shock to everybody, even though everybody knows that they've got that coming in their future, but they don't know when the moment is going to arrive. So there's always, you try and imagine all the expectations and the hopes and dreams that we all carry within us, and they're all disappearing in that moment.
You were talking about the moment that Matthew Weiner took you to his office to announce Len's death. When I read lots of interviews and you talked about this moment, what struck me is he almost announced Len Price's death like you announce the death of a member of a family to another member. Was it comparable?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Scott Hornbacher. There was the producer who told Matt, look, you got to let him know. I think probably Matt was putting it off. Matt had Frank Pearson in the writer's room as his, basically as an idol, a hero worship person who he respected so much that he would always listen if Frank had something to say that was counter. And Frank was telling him, don't kill me off, but he didn't listen to him. So I think Matt was torn about it, you know, but at the same time, I think it was just such a powerful way of ending that season. And I recognized that, you know, I knew it was going to be the big moment of the season. And so that was useful for me as Jared, as an actor, but it sucked because I was never going to, I was gone, you know, and it was such a wonderful place to work. It was such a great cast, a really good crew, fun atmosphere. They worked hard, and everyone pulled for each other. It was a good atmosphere. And John Hamm was a wonderful lead of the company. You know, he had his eye and made sure that the cast was looked after and protected, and no one was being, you know, not pushed around. Yeah, I think it was. It probably. I mean, it was a tough decision for him to make, I think. But I mean, Matt's smart. He always knew what he was trying to pull off. Also, probably on some level, I think that character was probably not useful in some way because, you know, the journey of that character was a story of corruption, you know, and I think he was just taking too long to corrupt. You know what I mean? Because everyone's so damaged on that show that
and the corruption of this character began with the character of John Hamm. It's a night with
a night on the town where they go out and getting drunk and then whoring. Yeah, it was the beginning of the corruption of that character. Yeah.
Before every season or even every episode of Mad Men, we knew very little of what was going to happen. Obviously, you shocked the last episode, the death of Len Price, months before it aired.
Sure.
This duration, you couldn't say anything about that. But you couldn't also take part in another TV series because
I made a deal with Matt about that.
What?
I made a deal with Matt about that. The only person who knew was my wife, and I'd come home and I just couldn't hide the sadness that when Matt had told me what was going to happen, I had a sort of heaviness around me, and she obviously saw that something was troubling me and, you know, significantly troubling me, and I said, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to be able to keep this a secret from her for the whole time. So I told her, and she's a steel trap, so, you know, I wasn't worried about that getting out. But I didn't tell my agent. He didn't know.
And
didn't tell my manager.
Yeah.
They didn't know. They were watching the episode. What? Right? So what the deal that I made with Matt was that whilst we were shooting that last episode, Sherlock Holmes' Game of Shadows was coming out, and I wasn't available to participate in the international press of it because I was stuck in LA. And I said, can we rearrange the schedule so that I can participate in some of it? I can do the stuff here, the stuff in London, and I can be part of these press junkets because I understood that's important for me and my profile as an actor in the community, in the business. And he wasn't really that into it. And I said, I'll make you a deal. I won't go up for pilot season. So no one will know that I'm not on the show any longer. I'll miss this year's pilot season if you let me go and do this. And he's smart, and he couldn't stop me from doing it. So he understood it was good for him because it would just increase the surprise factor.
It's an incredible loyalty.
Yeah, well, both ways. You know? Yeah.
Let's switch to another TV show, little known also. It's called The Crown, I guess.
Oh yeah.
You said about The Crown that the scripts were brilliant and they gave characters weights and depth, just like in Mad Men. We talked about improvisation in Mad Men just a little. I want you to watch this scene of The Crown.
Couldn't sleep and wouldn't sleep when love came and told me I shouldn't sleep. Bewitched, bothered, and bewildered am I. Lost my heart, but what of it? He is cold, I agree.
I agree.
He can laugh, but I love him. Although the laugh's on me, I'll sing to him each spring to him, and long for the day when I'll cling to him. Bewitched, bothered, and bewildered am I.
Great scene filled with so much emotions. We would like it to never stop, but it becomes all the more powerful because it's so brief. This scene was not an improvisation, obviously, because you sang, but it was not in the original script, right?
True. Yeah, Stephen did that quite a bit. But you know, the first 2 episodes were directed by Stephen Daldry, and he has obviously a very, very successful and respected career as a features director. And features directors, you know, they are, well, you know, I have to explain it to you guys. You know, they're the voice, you know, they're the vision, the auteur, right? And so they're used to thinking of the material and the scripts kind of being something that they mold into something that interests them. Not so true of television directors, because they're not in charge. They're directing 1 or 2 episodes and somebody else is coming in. So the showrunner tends to be the overriding vision, the voice that is being communicated, the point of view. But he didn't have that attitude towards what he was doing. So, and obviously he worked in concert and tandem with Peter Morgan, and so it wasn't, Peter Morgan wasn't looking at the dailies going, what the hell is this, you know? What happened in that case was, it was a conversation between him and Vanessa, him being Stephen, and they felt that they hadn't made a strong enough connection between the father and the daughter, and that everything that she was about to embark on in this season and the following season was going to be a result of the fact that her father died when she was so young, and she hadn't properly had a time that she was so bonded to him. There was this damage that she has the relationship with the older man, and they didn't feel that they'd made that connection, and they were looking and hunting for something. And Vanessa said, well, you know, they used to sing at the piano all the time, because Mrs. Margaret was a gifted pianist and she could sing. And she, it left to her own, she had a different life. She would probably have been in the entertainment world. So yeah, Stephen immediately went, that's it, that's what we'll do, that's what we'll do. So I just got called in one evening to go and record in the studio, go and record the song, and then this was suddenly on the schedule. But similarly, that scene with the crown, with the carolers, that was kind of improvised as well, because I remember Stephen, he said, listen, I think we're going to have the scene with the carolers, and I think that it would be good if you go up and you join the carolers. And it's an odd thing for him to do, you know. but I didn't know how that was going to affect me, and we didn't plan that. It just suddenly became this, you know, how the best way that he could possibly tell them, but he couldn't tell them. But, you know, it became overwhelming for the character. So, and that was Stephen as well. And he had a very good, very strong instinct for what the emotional current of his story was. And he, you know, less interested necessarily in plot, but I mean, he understood what parts of the plot that he needed, but there was an impact of an emotional journey that he was really focused on, and he understood what that was.
You played George Fix, Andy Warhol, John Lennon.
Yeah. Ulysses S. Grant.
So many. Through your research, do you realize or discover if these characters are different from the image they left or they've been given, and the reality of them?
Absolutely. You know, you do a lot of research, a lot of it's fairly dry and academic. A lot of the biographies tell you what they did on a Thursday and what they ate on a Friday morning, and, you know, that kind of thing. It's like a diary, like an expanded diary. And it's very difficult. You're trying to crack open and try and find something of the human animal in there. The thing for George was that I read this book by the governess who looked after the two princesses. And she said that every single day, except during the war, when they were sent, I think, up to Scotland, out of the way of the bombing, the two princesses. But every single day that they were in the same household as their parents, every single day started with the two girls going to their parents' bedroom and spending the first hour of every day with their mother and father, including the day that Elizabeth married Philip. And that was the last day that she would be there. And what that told me was that he was primarily, the most important thing to him was his family. And that he wanted them to have a sense of what that was and what it meant, and to protect that core unit, that the four of them were a family. And that once, after that hour, they left that room, and then they had to become these other things. But they had to have that. They had to understand that that's what was going to get them through this.
That's powerful to know that for playing character. When we see you playing George with this perfect aristocratic English accent, we really wonder how a teacher in your drama school said that these parts were not for you. What happened? Can you tell us why?
Why did he say that?
Yeah. What happened?
I think I had a prejudice. I had a prejudice about people who came from that background, and that they weren't, you know, they were kind of, they'd had their nuts cut off, and they were, you know, not, I don't know, it was a prejudice, that's what it was. They were just, I guess that they seemed artificial to me in some way, and so I was artificial in the way that I played them, or I'm not sure. I remember very clearly, his name was George Hall, and he was a wonderful principal of our drama school. He had such a he had a very strong personality and an incredibly light touch in the way that he would try and steer students in the right direction. And he, we went up to the music room, and he made me lie down on top of the piano, and he played the piano. And whilst he was wanting me to, we were doing vocal exercises, but he wanted me to get the resonances of the entire instrument. And he was saying, this is what you need, you know, because you might be playing a tune and it's playing in the, you know, primarily in the sort of, I don't know, what the top two chords of the piano is, but you have to have the knowledge of all those other notes there. You can't play them all at the same time because it's a mess. but you have to understand what the options of playing everything are, and then you make a choice. And I think he was trying to tell me that, you know, these guys, they have everything that you enjoy playing in these other characters that are dangerous characters, that are kind of, you know, lower class characters, that all these people share the same basic, you know, human mixture, if you like. I think that's what he was trying to get through to me. I remember that very clearly. Yeah.
About George, you said his job was relevance to his people. What's your job to the spectators and viewers?
That George's job was relevant or irrelevant?
Relevance to his people.
Relevant. I mean, I don't think you can put it better than Brando. You know, at worst we're entertainers, and at best we're poets. You're trying to tell stories about the human soul, the human journey, our desires, and all of its, you know, either successes and failures and fractures. And
you said also that the shooting of The Crown was a huge pleasure, a great experience, lovely actors. In another genre, The Terror was also a strong and rich experience. Yeah. Is it, when I watched The Terror, first it terrified me, so entertaining, cool. But second of all, I saw the story of a family. Do you agree with that? Did you see that in The Terror?
Yeah. I mean, those three things that you've brought up now are all, they all share in common the fact, phenomenal writing. Absolutely phenomenal writing as the, you know, the foundation for it. Yeah, that story was a story of, I mean, particularly for my character, he's a loner, he's got a chip on his shoulder, he doesn't feel any great bonds with the people. He doesn't understand Franklin's point of view, where he seems to have overly sentimentalized his relationship with these people in terms of his responsibility towards them. But as he gets through his own personal hell with his addiction and then starts to take on his responsibility, he starts to feel a tremendous kinship for these people that he's responsible for. And I remember having a chat with David Kajanich, and we were probably about to start shooting episode 7 at that point, I think. And he asked me, what do you think Crozier's metric for success is? What is he going to see as a successful outcome to this journey? I said, well, I've been thinking about that, and it's a really kind of a painful answer, because initially his metric for success is, if I can get most of them out alive, that's a success. And then it becomes, can I get some of them out alive? And that will be a success. And then finally, it's, can I get one of them out alive? And that will be a success. And when he's the only one, he can't go back because he's a failure. So yeah, it was tough. I mean, it was beautiful and it was tough, and we all got on with each other very well. And you know, the two really big specific scenes that express what you're talking about were the death of, and everyone's not watched this yet, Fitzjames, and the realization that Blanky isn't going to make it. And I was friends with both of those people as well. You know, I loved them, and we'd helped each other through some tough conditions out there. And so, you know, that all helps if you've bonded with the people as well.
Talking about bonding, when you're on the set for weeks and weeks and months, there's a bond between actors, hopefully. And there on The Terror, you shot on Pag Island, and it was a special moment for you and the other actors. You were quite alone on this island, right?
Yeah.
So it was a special moment for the bonding thing.
Yeah, it came towards the end of the schedule. It was actually really beautiful. It's a beautiful place in Croatia. And the thing that made it perfect as a double for Prince William Island is, I think on one side of the island, they get tremendous winds up to like 200 miles an hour. So it's very hard for life to grab hold of a piece of the rock because it just gets blown away. So it is pretty damn desolate on one side of the island. This is where we shot. And it was blowing away our tents. It was knocking over lights, and the cameras were in danger of disappearing. And it was really powerful. So, but it was also beautiful because it was before the season had started. So we pretty much had the town to ourselves. It was kind of an adventure. It was really one of those things where you think this is one of the perks of doing this job, is to be able to go to locations that you wouldn't normally get to and experience them in the way that if you were a tourist, you'd never get to see it that way. I mean, I did a movie called Shadow Magic, and it was about the first Chinese movie ever made in 1902. And we spent 4 or 5 mornings in the Forbidden Palace from 4 in the morning until 9 in the morning. There was nobody else there. It was just us running around like the little last emperor in that Bertolucci movie. We could, run everywhere. It was absolutely gorgeous, and you'd never get that. We were given permission to film on parts of the Great Wall that no one had set foot on for a couple of 100 years. It was absolutely incredible.
Another perk of the job is to meet your idols, and the terror. You met Tobias Menzies and Ciaran Innes because you were a fan of Rome.
Yes.
So it was a great perk.
Yeah. I was fanboying over them for the first couple of weeks, asking them lots of questions about the show, certain moments and their experiences together in Rome making it. It was a great show.
It was 2 seasons. And now I would like to go to another TV show, little known also, very Chernobyl, I guess.
Sure. Yes. Again, incredibly well written.
Yes, it is. Talking about writing, there's a line that I find very, very important between the character played by Emily Watson and the responsible of the party. Emily Watson tries to inform him of the danger, and he responds, "I prefer my opinion
to your facts." Yes.
Yes. Then we can see beyond the gripping story how relevant Chernobyl is right now. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was relevant in a different way when the show aired, because at that point, climate change was very much in people's minds, and there was the misinformation campaign about climate change. It was in full gear, and the whole debate about it, which is ridiculous, that the fact that there was, even a question about it. And now it's a different issue, Now it's a different issue. But yes, it's still, unfortunately, as Craig said, he's disappointed by the fact that it's still relevant today. He wished that those issues would have been resolved and it would become some great story about nostalgia. But I mean, it's about power. Essentially, the problem is it's about power, and the Soviet state is an authoritarian state, and their first instinct is to protect their own access to their power rather than solve the problem.
For your part of Valérie Legasov, your research was difficult, and you research a lot for your parts, but there it was difficult because it has been erased by the history and the authorities. Is this TV series, is Chernobyl a way to give back to those heroes a face and a name? In some
yes, it is, but specifically, I think it's towards there was thousands of Ukrainians and Belarusians who we don't know their name, who went in and sacrificed themselves. They either went into the reactor or they did the cleanup effort, and the guys on the rooftop. There are a lot of people who didn't expect ever for history to record who they were and what they did, and that was one of the moving things about Craig's script, because it never lost sight of that.
Mm.
And I suppose in a way, Legasov was useful in that he was on both sides of the fence. So there was something that was morally conflicted about him, but ultimately his fate is to be forgotten as well. So he can represent that side of the story too. But absolutely, and we had that in mind when we were filming it, that we were aware, and you would meet people. I met people in Lithuania whose family had uncles or they've had parents who had been involved in the cleanup and whose lives had been cut short by it. So,
talking about research for Chernobyl, you learned a lot about nuclear physics. That's another
yes.
perk of the job.
Yeah, yeah. But I could explain. I knew how the basic principles of how a reactor worked. Yeah.
Was it necessary to understand every word and to give these words the dramatic intensity they needed?
Yeah, it was. I mean, the challenging thing about that role was he's essentially an expositional device. Almost every scene that I'm in, I'm explaining something to somebody, and I'm explaining the science, or I'm trying to explain the danger that we're in, you know, and they're very difficult scenes to act, let alone roles to play. And you always have them at some point, and you normally have somebody who comes into a story, they deliver the exposition which sets it up, and then you have the drama unfold, you know. But to have someone who's constantly doing that through 5 episodes, the challenge of that thing was to make that story, I had to disguise the fact that it was exposition. You have to make them see that they're involved in a personal journey of the character. And the expositional side of it is just a side effect to it. Otherwise, you know, people, they glaze over with all the information that's been shoved down their throat, you know. That was the challenge with that part, was finding and making it a personal story to him that you were engaged in, and that the whole science and the expositional nature of it was almost invisible, but you didn't realize you were being handed this information at the same time. So you had to understand it really, really well, so that you weren't thinking about that. You know, my focus in the early episodes is my conflict with Stellan's character, and trying to persuade him to do what I know is necessary. You know, then it's trying to it's dealing with Gorbachev, and in the scenes with Gorbachev, you know, it's the idea of, you know, how dangerous this is, and you get carried away with trying to portray the importance of that over to, and then you realize who you're talking to. You're talking to someone who could disappear within minutes, you know, and so you catch yourself and you realize where you are, you know. You're just trying to find things like that so that you're, like I said, you're involved in the emotional journey of the character.
You were talking about the relationship between your character and Stellan, and it's why I wanted to show you this clip of Chernobyl.
The official position of the state is that a global nuclear catastrophe is not possible in the Soviet Union. They told the Germans that the highest detected level of radiation was 2,000 Röntgen. They gave them the propaganda number. That robot was never going to work. You need a new phone.
We need a new phone was ad-libbed. You didn't get many ad-libs in with Craig either, but that was ad-libbed.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
This clip shows that Chernobyl is much more than the story of a catastrophic event. Behind what Stellan Skarsgård says, there's this look to your character. Chernobyl, for me, is also a bromance.
Sure, absolutely.
And it's
Yeah,
a
that
beautiful
was
story
quite,
for bromance.
it was quite deliberate. I mean, Craig, a very, very smart writer. You know, he has a podcast, a very well attended podcast about screenwriting, and he devised the story to work on many levels. One of the chief spines of the story was there was the bromance between Cherubina and Legasov. Very clearly, it was that, and it also worked as it was a sort of, you know, the first episode is a kind of deconstructed horror movie, and then it becomes a sort of a thriller and an espionage thriller and political thriller, then it's a war movie, and then it's a courtroom drama, you know. And he understood all the various techniques that each one of those stories needs, so it helped him to figure out how he was going to tell the story, what he needed to do it. He's a very smart man, very, very smart man.
Very smart TV show. You said earlier that on a TV series, the director makes 1 or 2 episodes and then he leaves. For a miniseries, sometimes it's different. It could be the main director for all the season, all the episodes. What does it change for you as an actor to have the same director?
I always ask this question when I'm about to sign up, if I'm signing on to a limited series, is, are we having one director? Something like The Terror, you couldn't. I think probably, 5 episodes was a gargantuan task, even for a beast like Johan Renck. You know, and that man has just enormous energy and stamina, mental fortitude. Maybe 6 is the top. You couldn't do more than that. So then the next question I asked then is, will the showrunner be there the whole time? Because that is one of the things that I observed on Mad Men, which was, Matt, although he was present, but he wasn't there because we were shooting in the studios and he was writing in the studios. So if you needed to, you could make a call to him and he could come down and help resolve something. But the episodes that he directed were the most interesting ones to be on, because you had a proper dialogue then with your director, and then things could change, and they weren't. You didn't have the question of, well, we can't call him because it's 2 a.m. So for me, I want to know that I have a proper creative relationship with the person that's in charge, that's going to be there. And Craig said on Chernobyl, for example, he wasn't going to be there the whole time, but Johan Renck was his co-showrunner, and he understood what was important for Craig. And if Johan was all right with changing stuff, then it was okay. So then, okay, great. You've got that relationship. And it's tremendously important to have that, because you can start to slightly lose your way a little bit,
Talking about director and directing. Directed by Jared Harris.
There you go.
He directed 1 episode of season 7 of Mad Men, 2 years after you left the show. Why this episode precisely?
I was supposed to do one beforehand earlier in the season, but something happened with the schedule, so we couldn't. Basically, on my last day on the show, when I shot my last scene, and Matt and Scott and I were having a couple of slugs of whiskey, and he was, he had some regrets about getting rid of the character, writing the character off and writing me off. And he said, well, I really want to work with you again. And I said, well, great. I said, how about letting me direct an episode? And it was good timing to ask him that question.
Perfect.
Yeah. And so he was open to the idea of people who knew the show directing the show, because he knew that you understood what was important to him and what type of show it was. He had directors come in, feature directors come in, and he'd always had a little bit of a problem with what they had done with his show, that, you know, in small nuances that he would notice immediately, decisions that they made. So he was open to the idea. Then I shadowed Mike Uppendahl in season 6 on the episode The Crash, and then this opportunity came up, and I really wanted to do it. I was very excited. To be completely honest, you know, to a large degree, the show directs itself, because the crew all know what they're working on. They know what they're doing. There's 10,000 decisions that get made by a director, and 9,900 of them have already been made. You know, I had to have conversations with Janie Bryan about the costumes. Matt's doing all that. You know, all that stuff is done, and even down to, I'm not going to tell John Hamm something about Don Draper that hasn't occurred to him. So, you know, your job is really that you've got the script several weeks before they have, and you've read it by this time 20 or 30 times, and you're able to help just connect the dots, because they've got the script the day before, probably. They start shooting, and you're going to say, oh, this scene's connected to that, and it's earlier in the season this happened, and that's where. So it's just getting them up to speed, and then mostly you're helping the day players overcome their deer in the headlights look, because they're like, oh my God, I'm a madman, and there's John Hamm, or there's Christina Hendricks, you know. And any arty shots that I had in mind, Chris Manley very graciously would go, that's a great idea. It's a lovely shot. We're not going to do it. Matt will never use it. But it's a lovely idea, Jared.
But still, I think there are arty shots in the clip that I will show you now.
There are a few.
And you would have been screwing my grandmother.
You have somewhere to be?
I'm afraid so.
Tell her to join us.
She wouldn't like it. You wouldn't like it.
Now I've got to meet her.
You have. It's Marie. Marie Calvé.
You're serious?
Guess I should have asked your permission.
Just warn me before you tell Megan I want to leave the country.
She knows.
Then why didn't you tell me?
I wanted to make sure it wasn't going away.
She's crazy, you know.
When I married my secretary, you were hard on me. And then you went and did the same thing.
You know what? For the second time today, I surrender. I'm happy for you.
Thank you. You are okay.
What tremendous actors.
Yeah.
It's a lesson, drama lesson that we saw. And it's also a drama lesson to play a drunk character, actually.
Yeah.
And it's kind of difficult to play a drunk character.
Yeah. Honestly, I didn't have any influence on that at all. By that time, they knew very well how. I mean, it's very subtle. For example, that they realized that the Don Draper drunk thing was he's sober, he's a little bit drunk, he's very drunk, you know, and you just didn't need to do that much, you know. You didn't need to do a lot. And then, of course, they were smart because they know that most people who are drunk are really trying very hard to pass off as sober. And those two actors were aware that was their last scene together. So that was infused with there were a lot of goodbyes happening in that moment that they were aware of.
You are okay. It's an incredible line.
Yes.
It's simple, but incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those weren't one of the things where I could exert any kind of, I have a few ideas as director. One of my thoughts were that I wanted the story to come at you. So I wanted to put the camera, as much as I could, I wanted to put it in the doorway, because a lot of these episodes is people coming in and out of offices and in and out of doors, and they're rushing in with news. And rather than it be proscenium where they rush in and then turn, you know, and then they go, ooh, I thought it'd be more interesting if they're coming in at you with the information, so you felt like there was a sort of building momentum of what was happening. But again, the show is it's filmed the way that the DP understands Matt's going to edit it. So you can get away with a certain amount of that, but essentially you always have to provide a master and a mini master, and then you've got to do 2 shots, and then over the shoulders and singles, you know.
If I did my research well, I think it's not your first film as a director.
No.
If I showed you 2
No way,
pictures,
you don't have that.
2 little pictures.
You don't have that.
Pictures, just pictures
Okay.
from.
Oh yeah.
So you directed this movie at Duke University. It's called Dark Moor.
Yeah.
So why don't you want us to see this movie? Tell us.
Well, it's not very good.
No, but do you have a copy of the film?
Yeah.
You have?
Yeah, I do. You know, it was a kind of typical mistakes that you make if someone's trying to make a movie, which is I tell you what happened was a guest lecturer had come to the university, and he'd given this lecture about subliminal advertising and about the effects of advertising and what they were really trying to trigger you when people are the images that are created in advertising are not accidental, and they're trying to trigger things in your subconscious, in your sort of lizard brain, to get you to respond. And I found that was very interesting. And I started to, once he opened that door, you start looking at ads on television in different ways and in magazines and everything. And some of it was sort of verging on conspiracy theory, and other parts you could see very clearly he was absolutely right about. And then I was thinking about, well, I wanted to do some sort of a story about this if I was going to try and make this movie. So I thought it would be interesting to sort of somehow tell the story from the point of view of someone who was damaged, who then they didn't realize what their damage was, and that they were being activated in some way by the images that were in there without realizing it. And then it took them on a journey where they go looking for the parent that they'd never known, which in this case was his father. And it ends up being that the father is someone who's working in this industry planting all these images.
Cool.
So, you know, it was a sort of weird story, overly intellectual, if you like, or sort of self-referential. And you had sort of magical characters and all sorts of stuff that didn't work because I was too involved with like Shakespeare and stuff like that. And then I also was into poetry, so there were these monologues where he would spontaneously recite poetry to himself and trying to understand something that had happened. And yeah.
But you have a copy of the film.
I do. It looks good, I have to say.
Talking about movies, you said that you talked about this movie, I Shot Andy Warhol. You consider it your big break on the screen.
Sure.
Why?
The first one, yeah. You need several breaks, really. But
that's what I wanted to talk about. As an actor, you have to lead a career, which doesn't necessarily mean becoming a star. It means working, and it's all in your interviews. You have to work, so you need breaks and successes.
Yeah, it's very hard to maintain momentum without being a success. You know, without being in a hit. It's very difficult. That's obvious. You can see people who they had success early in their career, and that success early in their careers is constantly provides momentum. And or you can see people who were, I mean, Sam Rockwell, for example, brilliant actor, wonderful, been doing wonderful work for a long time. And, you know, I thought Confessions of a Dangerous Mind was going to be the one that broke it open for him, and should have, but it wasn't a success, you know, so it wasn't until Three Billboards, you know. So Anthony Hopkins, you can make the same argument for, wonderful. I mean, obviously well respected, but in terms of that big leap up, it didn't happen until later, you know. Humphrey Bogart, same thing. So there's lots of examples. You need several breaks, and another reason for that is because the generation of audiences change. You know, and there's a new group of people that the business is interested in trying to sell to, and the next lot have forgotten who the people were 15 years ago. You know, I mean, you'd probably be shocked if you went out there and polled people and you asked who Marlon Brando was. A lot of the people in their 20s and wouldn't know who he was at all. You know, so for that reason, you have to keep finding ways to remain part of the conversation. You know, I think the favorite term for that at the moment is relevant, being relevant. And then I think also you want to find ways to, you've got to keep challenging yourself. You've got to, for me, if something scares me, then that's a pretty good reason to say yes to it. If you sit there and go, oh, I couldn't do this, that's probably the best reason to properly entertain. You should probably do it.
So making Lincoln scare you?
Well, honestly, I wanted that, not so much getting the parts, but then once you've got it, you're working with Steven Spielberg. So, I mean, every actor in the world wants to work with Steven Spielberg. So, and just be on a set and see how he does it, you know. I mean, that part, I used to say, that's one of the roles that stuck with me for a long time. Grant, and the more you know, we asked a question earlier about educating yourself towards a character you're playing as a historical figure, and for example, that's a good example, because I had the conventional wisdom about that man. He was a drunk, he was a butcher, he was you know, a mildly competent military commander and corrupt as a president, and you know, largely the beneficiary of his success was his willingness to kill more of his soldiers than the other guy was. All complete shit. I mean, that's all, that history of him has been written by the South, the people who lost the war. And then they managed, from almost a year after the war's over, they managed to slowly rewrite the history of the war, completely change the terms of the war so that their understanding of what it was even over, the idea that it was about slavery was eradicated, you know, from the narrative. And then you start to look at, and you see, if you start looking at the most famous 20 most famous Westerns of all time, probably 15 of them at least are made from the Southern point of view, the Confederate point of view. It starts to be quite shocking how indoctrinated we are. But then, you know, I realize you start digging into what Grant's story was, and he's in military academies, his campaigns are taught. He's a genius, you know, as a strategian and as a tactician. And the Vicksburg campaign is considered to be up there with Napoleon's campaign against the Austrian Empire, you know. So you then realize what's interested me after that was, there's a great story that has not been told, that it should be told about that man.
There's the ground here for an idea of a miniseries on him. Oh,
sure.
Wait,
well,
pitched that to Spielberg.
I did actually. I tried to when we were on the set, but he was editing Warhorse and Tintin. When he wasn't on the set, they were doing a lighting change. He'd nip into a tent and he would be editing those two films, and he was making this one. So yeah, it was. But no, I haven't given up on that. I'm actually in conversations with people about it at the moment. David Kajanich and I, who wrote The Terror, are seeing if we can get something going about that. So
Cool.
maybe cross our fingers.
Let's talk about what's next. And the next big thing is, I guess, Foundation.
Yeah, well, I'm working on a show at the moment called The Beast Must Die, for Scott-free new agency and BritBox. And then when I finish here, I go back to Ireland to complete the Foundation, and we got COVID, so we're going back to finish it up.
How did you live this whole period of pandemic and the lockdown and everything's shut out? How did you live that?
You know, I have to say that my wife kind of, she lives in Florida and she's been through natural disasters. And so she had a much better sense of what was about to happen and where this was going than I did. So I benefited a lot from her prescience, if you like. But on a wider scale, I think it's just been a tremendous failure of international leadership and cooperation. And I can't understand why we aren't asking the South Koreans and the Taiwanese, people who have experienced this before, and they were prepared, and why the West can't basically say, teach us what you know, rather than we're going to make our own mistakes first and then get to where you are now in 2 years from now. Why we can't ask them? Because, you know, they're handling it a lot better than we are. So I think it's a failure of Western democracy, if you like, Western leadership. I mean, you know, EU-wide, some countries have done better than others. America's obviously had a terrible result. And it's depressing that it's become a political issue. It should never, ever be one.
To conclude this interview, I would like you to listen to a little something. It's just audio, no video. Just listen.
Okay.
Our greenhouse is where a beau geste ran to deep in the desert. Our gooseberry bushes was where I ambushed all the Wells Fargos. Our apple trees was where I played Tarzan with my neighbour Sally. She wasn't as pretty as Maureen O'Sullivan, but I forgave her when she rescued me from the hungry crocodiles.
It's from the album of music and poetry called I in the Membership of My Days by Richard Harris and Sons. You were 13 when it was released.
If you say so.
I checked. No, it's incredible.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that you on the song? Because I didn't find your voice.
I did too. Jamie, my younger brother, did too, and my elder brother did too.
How does it feel?
That was the two I did was I forgot what the other one. I did that one and another one. I ran away from home. My younger brother did. My sister had a dog named Reggie, and another one. And my elder brother did the slightly more mature ones about mum was crying on the phone, about him overhearing the arguments between the parents and the effect that it had upon him hearing it. Yeah, I remember that really well. What I remember about that recording session was Dad couldn't be there for the recording session, and he told me, look, Jared, when you get to the line about your sister's knickers, don't laugh. I know you're going to want to laugh. Don't laugh. It's like, okay, I won't. And of course, when I get to that line, I laugh, right? and they kept it in. And now what I realized was Dad couldn't be there. He wanted me to laugh.
Smart.
He was very smart. Yeah. Yeah, he wrote a lot of poetry. And I found after he died, I found tons of it, absolutely tons of it. You could see in his early writing, he was very influenced by Dylan Thomas and Samuel Beckett. But his later work became, I think, a little bit more personal. I mean, his great poem from that book of poetry is "There Are Too Many Saviors on My Cross," which I don't know if you read it, but it's basically taken from the point of view of it's about Northern Ireland. It's about the conflict between the North and the South, and the death and the murders and the atrocities that are going on. And it's written from the point of view of the Christ, who's saying, don't take my name, don't kill each other in my name. You're all you're doing is sullying the sacrifice that I made, which I thought, on many levels was quite appropriate for, Dad was going to talk in the voice of God, put himself into God's shoes. He would do that without blushing at all.
Very last questions. Your parents wanted you to become a lawyer or a teacher.
Something like that.
Could the lesson be, don't listen to your parents?
I think the few times that I've been asked for advice for someone whose child is interested in going into the business, my advice is throw up every single obstacle that you can think of, because this is the easiest it's ever going to be. And if they aren't determined to overcome every obstacle that you can throw up in front of them now, then it just gets harder and harder. And you have to have that determination. You have to have that single focus that God damn it, I'm going to do this. I want to do it. I have to do it. There's nothing else I want to do. This business attracts people for all sorts of reasons. And, a lot of them aren't the right ones. They're sort of things that seem attractive about the periphery of it. So if you have something in your heart that you want to do, ignore everybody, pursue it. But at the same time, your parents are always looking out for you, and they are worried, and they understand what the dangers are that they're trying to help you avoid. So, you should hear what they say, but if you care enough, you should pursue your own dream.
Perfect ending to this interview. I just have a little French line to say, and then we'll say goodbye.
Okay.
Merci à toutes et à tous d'avoir suivi cette séance sur CANNESERIES Live. N'oubliez pas que vous pouvez également retrouver sur la plateforme chaque jour de nouveaux rendez-vous et de nouvelles séries. Bon festival et à bientôt. So, Mr. Harris, I hope
Jared.
it went well. I hope.
Yes, I enjoyed it very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good questions, good research. You obviously did some deep diving there.
I tried.